Jolie fille, pourquoi vous pas viens?
Hi Don, this is Kathy Hambrick from the River Road African American Museum. And I want to thank you for doing this interview for me as I've been in isolation, as you and all of our other friends in New Orleans and around the country need a little something for a distraction. So I'm hoping you'll answer a few questions for me. Things that you've told me over the years about your family and your music. And we'd like to share this on social media with our friends around the world. Question number 1. Do you have any ancestors or relatives from the Donaldsonville area or any of the bayou country or bayou lands up the Mississippi River from New Orleans?
Hey Kathy, thanks for the opportunity. And I'm in isolation as well. Your first question, yes, my mother was born in Welcome, Louisiana, which is not far from Donaldsonville. So that whole family is from there. That's where my great-grandfather, Valcent Joseph, was there. So, yeah, all those Josephs in Donaldsonville, Sidney and Odine and Bernadette, that whole family. Well, Sidney's not with us anymore, but he really loved music. And you know, we used to come to Donaldsonville all the time for our family reunions every other year. I believe we'd do it like that because we had other cousins of mine. I'm sure you know Reynold Richard, his son Thaddeus Richard, Plas Johnson. We're all descendant from Valcent's children. We're all descended from Valcent. So I didn't know this till later on in my life, but yeah, I've family all up and down that river. It's great.
Number 2, do you feel that this has had an impact on you and your music today?
So Kathy, your second question, the impact, I guess, on my life and my music. I played in the school band, and when I got to high school, you know, I wanted to be a bass player. Ended up playing electric bass and guitar. So the first band I was in, because we had garage bands all around, ended up being in a band with my cousin, Stanley Joseph, whose uncle was Sidney Joseph, lived in Donaldsonville. The family's still there. So Stanley and I, he played drums, and we played for years together. I mean, I would say maybe decades. And we ended up going different ways. He did some other things. I ended up playing music with different people. It's funny because later on, I ended up playing with another cousin, Richard Moten, who was Marie Moten's son, who is Marie Moten's son. And he's a bassist. He plays bass. He also plays a little piano, which I didn't realize. So in that way, family has connected with me throughout my life. But in another way, which I didn't realize, is that the love for music, the love for art, the love for culture that was embedded in my family through the love of music. Like, for instance, I mentioned Sidney Joseph. Well, in talking to Sidney, and we used to visit, I would say fairly often, because my mother she loved being with Sidney and his wife. We call her Dean, but she just loved him. And we'd go visit sometimes, and I remember talking to Sidney, and he was very knowledgeable about music, not just whatever was on the radio, but he was knowledgeable about jazz and who played, and you know, that made me think of my mother, who was also, she loved to dance. There was always music in the house. And I was born much later than the other kids in the family in that same generation. You could say I came up with the grandchildren. So my mother was older when I was born, but it wasn't until later in her life that she told me she used to go dancing on on Ferret Street, and I asked her, you know, she was in her 80s. I said, well, who was playing, you know? 'Cause at this point, I've played at Jazz at Lincoln Center with Wynton Marsalis. I've toured, had my own group, did albums. So my mom's like, says, oh, whoever was playing, we just danced to whoever, you know. I said, well, who? She said, I don't know. You know, Fats Waller or maybe Cab Calloway, one of them bands like that. And I'm thinking, geez, my mom was in the audience for these, you know, iconic musicians that I look up to. And she mentioned a time when Papa John, who was her uncle, my great uncle, my grandmother's brother, he caught her out there. Well, he was there and she was dancing, he saw her and he's like, oh, please don't tell my daddy and blah, 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 and that's another story. But it made me think, well, Papa John, I'd heard about this guy, and I remember going to his funeral when I was a young kid, somewhere along River Road. And my wife, Millie, is a historian. She's a great researcher, and she really helped me find all this information. Well, Papa John was a bass player, and from what I understand, a fairly good one. And he played with all these bands in the turn of the century, the turn of the 1900s. So I found out that he and his brother Nelson, and maybe another brother, had a barbershop. And that barbershop was located across the street from Buddy Bolden's home. Now, Buddy Bolden, most people know Buddy Bolden was like considered the first jazz player. If you want to come like that, things don't happen like that. But you know, he's a famous guy. He's definitely an icon for New Orleans people, for jazz. And so I'm realizing here that not only am I influenced by my family's love for music and culture, but I'm also descendant of a family who was very instrumental in the beginnings of jazz in New Orleans, because that barbershop acted as the meeting place for black musicians back in that time. It was another time. Sorry about all the cars passing, y'all. I'm on a busy street in the country, believe it or not. That just amazed me. And even now we're trying to fight to keep Buddy Bolden's house where he lived, to keep it up and make it a landmark. It's too bad they tore down the barbershop, because that would have been a landmark as well. But it's in the history books. Now, add to that another memory of growing up, and I guess I was in college. I must have been 20 years old. And I'm practicing my guitar, and my grandmother's living with us. And that's Papa John's sister, Stella. We called her Stella. I called her Mom. But she walks through. She must have been 90, 89, something like that. She says, yeah, I used to play guitar. And I'm like, where'd this come from? She said, well, yeah. I said, why'd you stop? She said, well, arthritis made her stop. So that was an interesting memory for me, because I'm trying to play guitar, and banjo came later, but she said she played guitar and banjo. Now, Papa John played bass. That's what I always wanted to play, and I still do play. Now, fast forward some more. I happen to be having a conversation with Marie Moten, Richard's mother, because we're playing together, and she's like experiencing joy that her son and I are playing together. For her, family is playing together again. Because she told me the story of how all the brothers and sisters would meet for Sunday for the meal out in the country. We called it the country, so it'd be out like in Welcome, Louisiana, or wherever they lived along the river there. And they would meet and they would play music together on Sundays. And she told me everybody played a string instrument. They were all string players. So in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, that kind of reinforces the whole thing of the early string bands in New Orleans. And then she told me a story of one of the brothers, Willie. His nickname was Kaiser. They called him Willie Kaiser Joseph. Well, he's on some recordings I found in the 1920s. Now, they said Willie played clarinet. And Marie says, you know, Willie wanted to play that clarinet. When he was learning how to play it, they made him go way out in the cornfield to practice because it was such an awful sound. I got such a kick out of that. But all of this coming together, so, man, what my family impact on me, music for me, what I do as a living, as a profession, is my family. And I am so proud of them. Now, Thaddeus Richard, I know he's toured with different groups, but the most famous is Paul McCartney. He was part of the Wings band. He's got gold records or platinum records on his wall. His father, Reynold, wrote I Got a Woman. He composed I Got a Woman and was Ray Charles' first band leader. I had no idea of how famous some of my cousins are. Plas Johnson. I knew, okay, he played on the Pink Panther. He's the saxophone player guy on the Pink Panther. I kind of knew that. I knew he was famous, but we got together once and Plas made me a compilation of all the things he played on in his life as part of the Wrecking Crew, which is another famous band out in LA that recorded for everybody. I mean, Plas is on almost every record I have. I saw his name on one of my Steely Dan records. He played the piccolo solo on Rockin' Robin. He's on Purple People Eater. He's on some of the Marvin Gaye songs where he's playing sax solos. So I've got, just in those three, I've got really famous people. Now there are other people in the family that are famous too. I've done some pretty prominent gigs. And I'm thinking, wow, man, all my cousins are famous. And then, you know, Richard tells me, he said, well, hey man, you play at Jazz at Lincoln Center with Wynton Marsalis, you know? Well, yeah, that's true. I'm on a bunch of those records, and you know, and I always forget about it, but when I was 17, maybe 18, I played guitar at the Blue Room in New Orleans, and it was the Fairmont Hotel back then. It's the Roosevelt now. And I actually played with all these stars for their shows. Barbara Eden, Carol Channing, Rich Little, Peggy Lee. Peggy Lee's guitar player had quit, and I filled in the last 4 days, and it's amazing because she really liked the way I played the show, and she offered me the gig. But you know, I was studying bass, and guitar was kind of a hobby, and I'm thinking, you know, I didn't feel confident to go out on the road. What's even more interesting to me now is that she gave me a note, a handwritten note that said, if I ever want to play, just tell Dick Stabile. And I found that note a couple years ago and looked at it, and now that I've done what I've done in my life, I look at that note and think, boy, you were stupid. You could have left town. And I told that to Wynton one time. I said, man, Peggy Lee offered me a gig. I was like 18. He's like, why you didn't go, man? I said, well, you know, I was just, Wynton was like, man, I couldn't wait to leave. But you know, I don't regret anything. And I'm very proud of all my family members. And it's really an honor to be part of this family. It really is.
And number 3, would you play a little something for us?
I'm going to play a couple of tunes on my new CD, if that's all right. Shameless plug. This is one of them. And in fact, I started learning some Creole songs just to be more connected to the culture and keep that alive. So, little car sounds in the back. jolie fille, pourquoi vous pas venir ici? Jolie fille, pourquoi vous pas venir ici? Vous connaissez, je l'aime vous, volez-vous pour moi chérie? There's another groove in there. Mais quelle jolie fille dans cette maison. Mais quelle jolie fille dans cette maison. Si vous croyez moi, je sais bien attendre. Mais quelle jolie fille dans cette maison. Mais quelle jolie fille dans cette maison. Si vous croyez moi, je sais bien attendre. Jolie fille, pourquoi vous pas venir ici?